into this newscast with WION's continuous coverage on the escalating tensions between Iran and the US, as Iran has now struck back against the United States. Just hours before Qasem Soleimani's burial ceremony, Iranian missiles struck two military bases in Iraq, both of which were housing American troops deployed in the country. Now, in the wee hours of today morning, Iran launched 15 ballistic missiles at twin targets in Iraq, which were housing US troops. The Erbil military base in northern Iraq and the Asad base in central Iraq were targeted, as you can see on the map in front of you. Now, these bases have a larger number of Iraqi troops than American troops, and as of now, we have not heard reports of any US casualties. 10 missiles targeted the Al-Asad base, while one of them hit Erbil. 4 ballistic missiles are being said to have failed. Donald Trump has given his response. All is well, according to President Donald Trump. An initial assessment of casualties and damages is underway. It's late night in the United States, so Trump will be making a statement in the morning, most likely. But this, of course, is a signal of uncertainty from the United States. After such a prominent and daring attack, the American public would have been expecting a more robust response from the US president. He has not hinted at retaliating against Iran. It has to be seen whether or not this is a de-escalatory tactic by President Donald Trump. Now, immediately after the strike, the US top administration went into a huddle. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Pentagon Chief Mark Esper arrived at the White House to brief the president and take stock of the situation. From the Iranian side, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has tweeted his response. Zarif says that the attacks were carried out in self-defense under the UN Charter. According to him, Iran does not seek escalation or war. So the ball is currently... Iran's communications minister, in a tweet, has asked the US troops to, quote-unquote, get out of West Asia. A senior advisor to Ayatollah Khomeini took a pot shot at Trump by tweeting a picture of the Iranian flag. This is in response to Donald Trump's tweet with an American flag following Soleimani's killing. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have warned the United States against retaliating to the strike. The Iranian Guards have said that US bases are well within their strike capability. And a senior official in Ayatollah Khomeini's office says that this airstrike was the weakest of all options available to Iran. Now, this, of course, begs the question, what is the strongest response scenario that Iran has planned? Officials on the ground are waiting for daylight so as to make more detailed assessment. Initial reports indicate that the missiles struck parts of the base that are not populated by US troops. There are close to 50 Al-Asad, and the base was reportedly on high alert already, expecting an attack from Iran. The US is scrambling to respond to Iran's aggression. In Baghdad, military jets could be heard flying over the airspace. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has had a telephonic conversation with the Prime Minister of Kurdistan. The top Kurdish official has requested Pompeo to de-escalate tensions in the region. Let's quickly get in some perspective as to the latest developments that have just taken place and how they could impact the global scenario. And for that, I'm joined in by Mr. Mustafa, who is the editor-in-chief of Iran's Fars news agency. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Mustafa. Now, you know, what we have witnessed in the past few days on the streets of Iran, you know, we saw those streets packed with mourners grieving the death of their slain general. That was just perhaps an indication of what is going to come in America's way. How do you analyze this significance in terms of military strategy?
Hello and good morning. Well, Iran has 13 scenarios for confronting the United States. The ultimate goal is pushing the United States out of this region. This was the first phase. This doesn't mean that it will be followed by another missile strike unless the U.S. takes action to reciprocate Tehran's missile attack on Wednesday. But the point here is that Iran targeted Asad because it was used for launching the drone that targeted General Soleimani. Also, the Ain al-Assad airbase is the main airbase of the United States in Iraq. It supports all U.S. Army missile shields across the country. So the main target was taking down and destroying the radar and as well as the infrastructure at Al-Asad embarks on an act of, reciprocal action, Tehran could take toll. Early reports for us here in Tehran says that 80 U.S. Army soldiers have been killed, over 200 have been wounded. The American officials do not allow the Iraqi Army soldiers to get into the Al-Asad air base. They are taking out their casualties on choppers. And one more point is that there will be more phases of operations, but in different nature, actually, not through missile attacks. This is not going to be the end. It just heralded Iran's reciprocal moves to ultimately see the U.S. pull out of this region.
Right. One senior official has already confirmed that the airstrike was the weakest of all options available to Iran at the moment. So as you may see, as you rightly point out, more retaliatory measures. We are obviously looking at a dangerous situation, but going by the latest rhetoric coming in from Iran's foreign minister, who has called it an attack in self-defense under the UN Charter, or even looking at President Trump, who has tweeted a surprisingly calculated response, do you view a de-escalation in the offing?
Well, as far as the United States response is concerned, I don't think that the U.S. would reciprocate the action, considering that Iran has pointed out, in the same tweet that you just mentioned from Foreign Minister Zarif, that it was a reciprocal, military action for now, and Tehran would not take military action like this, missile strikes, apparently, if it's not targeted by the U.S. response again. I don't see much chance for reciprocal action through military action, direct military action. For Iran would be Iranian allies in the region now. They would have a free hand now to embark on their own plans to reciprocate the targeted assassination of General Soleimani. You know that he was loved and he was supported by many groups across the region, like Hezbollah, like the Iraqi groups. They have vowed to take their own revenge. Now they have a free hand to go on and move ahead to do their own actions, as it has been already announced by a few Iraqi popular groups. It was announced yesterday that they would wait for Iran to take action first and then they move ahead.
All right, I'm going to come to the neighbors as far as what you just mentioned is concerned. Do you view Iran's missile attack as a departure from its conventional methods of veiled attacks and proxy wars? And can Iran actually afford any further escalation?
Well, first of all, Iran doesn't have any proxy forces, groups and forces. They are some oppressed nations and people that have come under attack. They request help from Iran. But they act independently, not just with regard to Qasem Soleimani's reprisal, but also in all cases, they are independent. Tehran does not look at him as an instrument or a proxy. Tehran respects its allies, no matter if they are in Yemen, in Lebanon, Syria, or Iraq. The whole point is that all these groups have requested help from Iran, since 4 decades ago, when they came under attack. Like Hezbollah, was formed when Lebanon came under attack and was occupied by Israel. The same is true about Palestine. The same is true about Yemen. And the same is true when, according to U.S. officials, Saudi Arabia and a number of its allies started proxy warfare in Syria and Iraq. This has been acknowledged by Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, as well as Joe Biden, who is now a candidate, a former vice president, and many others, according to documents, to WikiLeaks documents also. This was the United States ally, Saudi Arabia, as well as the U.S. itself, that started this mess in the whole region. So Iran is acting in self-defense of itself and its allied groups in the region.
All right, since you've mentioned the allied groups, Mr. Mustafa, how is West Asia, that is also a global energy market, looking at this scenario? Primarily Iraq, which seems to be in the middle of this quagmire, also looking at countries which are on the other side of the fence in West Asia, and also talking about Saudi Arabia.
Well, let's remember that Iraq's sovereignty has been violated. The Iraqis, the Iraqi government, the Iraqi people, parliament, everyone feels insulted and humiliated by their guests, the Americans, who were there to join them hunting down ISIL, Daesh. But what they did was killing the leading commander of anti-ISIL coalition in the region, the one who had defeated led the coalition of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Russia on the ground in the combat against Daesh. The point here is that the Americans have been bombing part of the Iraqi official armed forces in the past 10 days, and the Iraqis are very much furious, independent from the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. They are very much furious to see that their army men that have been the hero of war against terrorism, they've been bombed, they've been killed, hunted down by their guests who were supposed to help them. So they approved a law at the parliament to kick Americans out of their country, and now they want more revenge. So basically, no matter the Iraqis themselves are insisting on combating the Americans if they don't pull out of Iraq.
Right. And before I let you go, Mr. Mustafa, with the slaying of General Soleimani, has the United States now opened a Pandora's box with little or perhaps no room left for a renegotiation of the nuclear deal and an acceleration, in fact, of Iran's nuclear ambitions due to the abandonment of the restriction limits?
Well, I don't see any chance for the nuclear deal anymore. It's a long time that we know the nuclear deal is dead already, because Iran has been in full compliance with its undertakings for the past 2-3 years. And the United States has discarded the deal. The Europeans do not take any kind of action to provide Tehran with the merits that they promised under the deal. Therefore, a one-sided deal would never work. If Iran continues compliance, then Tehran would be the only loser that's compromising its power, its nuclear industry, especially in nature and road. But it should either be a win-win case or a lose-lose game. Apparently, the U.S.-led West has opted for a lose-lose formula.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mustafa, for bringing in your perspective, in fact, adding a new dimension to the narrative that's been taking place since the morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this live broadcast. Staying with more news coming from Iran, there's been a major plane crash near the Iranian capital of Tehran. Iran's state media are reporting that all the 170 passengers on board the aircraft have been killed. The Ukrainian flight 752 was heading towards Ukraine's capital of Kiev, but reportedly crashed due to a technical glitch. Shortly after takeoff, initial reports indicated that there is no link between the airstrikes in Iraq and the plane crash. Emergency forces were dispatched to the crash site, but many were too big to be controlled. The aircraft reportedly crashed near the suburb of Baram, southwest of Tehran. The flight was scheduled to take off at around 5:15 a.m. local time, but it was delayed by almost an hour. Now, we do not know whether or not this delay is in any way related to the technical difficulty that later led to the crash. Boeing has reacted to the crash, saying it's aware of the reports. The company said it's trying to gather more information about the incident. This is the third major crash involving a Boeing plane in under 12 months. This is the latest that we are bringing to you. These are the latest visuals of the crashed plane, which was a Boeing model. This was a Ukrainian flight 752 that was heading towards Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Reportedly, it crashed due to a technical glitch shortly after takeoff. Initial reports have established that there has been no link between the missile strikes that took place in Iraq and the plane crash that has taken place in Tehran shortly after takeoff. The emergency forces, as you can see, have already been dispatched to the crash site. Many on the ground have said that the blaze was too big to be controlled. It's tragic because This is one aircraft that crashed aircraft has killed close to 170 passengers. And it crashed near the suburb of Farang in southwest of Tehran. Boeing has also reacted to the crash, saying it's aware of these reports. The company has said that it's trying to gather more information about the incident. It's important to note that this crash is the third major crash involving a Boeing plane in the last 1 year. Remember, Boeing has been courting much controversy for the recent crashes that have taken place, those primarily related to the Boeing 737 MAX, of course.